Well, a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Of course, for those of you that are familiar with the channel and myself, you'll know that I'm here in Perth, Western Australia, and it's actually afternoon today, so you probably won't know that. It's been a long day, and I am leaving this obviously until the last minute. I haven't been procrastinating, which I'm rather pleased about. I've actually been intensely busy, but either way, I am recording this on the day of upload, so I better get cracking. Look, before I get into the content today, we are talking about the crystal Blue Dumortierite. It's a very interesting crystal. It's got lots of very practical and helpful benefits from what I can gather, or it's attributed to have them. Um, I also would like to invite you to make your own comments, your own experiences. I've only used Blue Dumortierite once, and that just happened to be yesterday. And just a reminder to people that are new to the channel, I put timing into the description so you can jump to the places that you're interested in, because I do recognize sometimes the videos get a bit long and time is premium for everybody. Everything. Everybody seems to be so busy with their lives that we don't have time to waste. And you can go straight to the bits that you consider to be interesting to you or important to you, which would probably, I imagine, be the attributes to start with, and then looking at how to buy what it is that you're looking for when you're actually buying a product. The other stuff is, I guess, just based on what your interests are, really, because everything I do, I design it to be personalised so that you can adapt it to whatever. So just going back to that, yes, there are timing chapters here, and I'll try not to be too weary in my voice, all right? I will try and be interesting today. Hopefully I'll manage that. Anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at it. I found it a little bit difficult to find images of Dumortierite, actually, simply because um, as with all the crystals, they come in different shades and hues. And so the Dumortierite that I have here, that I purchased more recently, it's actually a lighter colour. It's more like the egg that we've got on the thumbnail of this video. But anyway, I was motivated to do the video for Dumortierite and to basically push it forward. And this is because I recently, well, the last video I put up was Blue AVenturine, and there was a whole debate around what causes the blue stripes in Blue AVenturine. And my understanding is that it is the Dumortierite that is actually within the Blue AVenturine itself that gives it those lovely stripes. It just seems to be the way the rock forms. But anyway, what more can I say about this? This you can see is a particularly interesting carving. Now, whether it's a lighter blue or not, it's going to have flecks within it, and mine certainly does as well. And of course, the colour of the flecks can be a little bit different. You can see with this one here, it's kind of a more dark. I can understand why some people call it a denim type blue, and in this one it's got little bits of flecks of the black. I'm not sure what creates the black, but you can see anyway, you get a bit of an idea of what we're looking at. So as far as the zodiac signs are concerned, it's actually recommended as a crystal for use by people under the star signs Taurus, Leo and Libra. Now, as always, if you've watched the other videos, you know that I say it doesn't matter what your star sign is. If you feel drawn to a crystal, then that is the one for you. But also, more to the point, that often, and I've spoken to so many people about this, we think we're drawn to a crystal until we walk into a retail shop where there's lots of crystals around, and then we find that we're actually drawn to another one. But either way, when we're shopping online, of course, we're going to be looking at an image and think, yeah, that's the one I like. But either way, these are the recommendations or the suggestions. And if you are one of these star signs and you decide to buy it because of the recommendation, then I'm very open to hearing about your experiences with it. I would imagine because, yeah, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to try and imagine why it's recommended for these star signs. Libra's an air sign, Leo's a fire sign, and Taurus is an earth sign. Perhaps to do with the repatterning. Maybe it's because Libras have tendencies to struggle to make decisions. Perhaps it will help them to be a little bit more decisive. The fire signs, maybe it's about calming, the calming aspects of it. And the Taurus, I'm really not sure about the Taurus, why it would be recommended for them. No doubt it's got something to do with the metaphysical attributes, why the recommendations are made. But from an overview perspective, Blue Dumortierite is associated with self-mastery. And when we talk about self-mastery within this context, we're talking about our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviours, our beliefs, being able to check the inner dialogue and the mind scripts that we have and transform them into positive. Now, ultimately, it's also associated with improved relationships, and this is probably because of improvements with communication. Other things it's associated with is that personal and spiritual growth and development, and the capacity to learn new information and to retain that as knowledge, and this expanded perception that is associated with increased awareness and understanding. And that can be self-awareness or even awareness of others, and more compassion, I guess, and empathy, although that's not something that I've seen attributed to Blue Dumortierite per se, but to me that's a natural flow on to developing awareness and understanding. So I guess the first thing to acknowledge when we look at the mineral information, if you're familiar with the channel, you know that I actually get a little bit bored by the mineral stuff. I do appreciate it. I know that it's relevant, especially when it comes to buying materials, but so that we're not being ripped off and so that we know where to go to find the product. But I think my head just goes like, oh, it's all too hard. Anyway, especially when we look at terms like, aluminium borosilicate mineral, whoopee. Either way, this is actually the family that Blue Dumortierite is, you may as well say, the catchment area of. Obviously, my way of expressing this does not meet professional criteria. There's a good reason for that. If you're new to the channel, I am not a scientist. I am not a geologist or a gemologist or a lapidarist or whatever. I am a layperson with an interest in crystals, and on my journey of appreciation, if you like, of the metaphysical properties, I've picked up certain information about the crystals themselves. Plus, I've grown up in a lot of areas where there is natural resources of rocks and minerals, and so I have a real appreciation for them in their natural form and not necessarily the carved form either. But anyway, I'm digressing here. So when we talk about Blue Dumortierite, I'm not even sure if this is 100% accurate, okay? And this is because there's variations with that, but it's supposed to be a mineral hardness of between 7 and 8. Now, that's actually, as far as the hardness goes, reasonably hard, because 10 is the highest. So that will mean that it can tolerate a certain amount of, not necessarily damage, I wouldn't like to say that. Like the more soft it is, the more fragile it is, the more susceptible it is to breaking and scratching. So there is a certain resilience associated with Blue Dumortierite. Now, when I say Blue Dumortierite, the information that I got is that it's available, Dumortierite as a mineral itself is associated with other colours. Excuse me as I swallow. It can also be found, and you'll see in the next images that I've got, sometimes it can be opaque, which means that it's solid, you can't see through it to anything else. Other times it can actually be quite translucent. Now, as far as rarity goes, it depends on the type that you're getting. The next images are going to show you and explain this. If you're looking at the type or looking for Dumortierite in much the same as we've got in this image on the right, the bigger image, that's quite abundant. It's not rare, okay? But if you're looking for the crystallized forms, as you see on the bottom of the text box, that stuff's a lot more rare. When we talk about where do we find it, what's the location, it's found in aluminium-rich areas. And you can see here, I've written down some of the names. Now, I always know when I go and get the research on or do the research on this information of locations, that's not necessarily a complete list of where you can find it, but it's a starting point, okay? Now, the other thing that's very important to know and understand is that when we talk about anything that's got aluminium in it, there is a certain level of toxicity associated to it. So as far as Dumortierite goes, my understanding is it's perfectly safe to handle, especially if it's been carved and polished, but it is absolutely not suitable for ingestion or inhalation. So those people that are the carvers, they would need to take precautions against inhaling it, and you would not be using it to drink or putting it in your water or whatever, especially if you've got kidney disorders. So, my apologies, I've had to stop and start recording this video at this point, and this is because I received a delivery, and of course my little dog went berserk. So, getting into it, when it comes to the buying tips, re-recording, beyond the what I consider to be normal stuff that I go over all the time with all of the videos, is if you're going to make a purchase and you're buying online, it often is very difficult to tell what it is you're getting until you actually get it in your hand. So you want to see how tall it is, how wide it is. You want to know the circumference of it. If it's a cluster, you want to know the width of the cluster as well. So you want to have it from all sides. You want to get a photograph of it, preferably up against a ruler, and you want to know the weight of it. And beyond that, you want to know where your seller is located, and this is where the relevance of where the mineral is sourced from comes into place. And this is because the more a crystal is handled and passed along from say the source, which is the person that pulls it out the ground, and passed on to various people for selling, the on-selling process, then the price gets marked up. So if it's a long way from home, shall we say, or if it's been through multiple people, then it's going to end up becoming more and more expensive by the time it gets to you. So you also want to be looking at things like the currency. What is the freight? What is it going to cost to actually get to you? And once you know that, then you will be able to look around, do a price comparison and see if you're actually getting a good deal. Or maybe you just want that crystal so bad because you feel drawn to it, that actually you don't care what you pay for it, because sometimes people are like that when it comes to their crystals. The other thing too is, of course, you want to look at quality. Now, one of the things that I did look at, and I was able to establish, there is not a lot of information online about whether or not Dumortierite can be faked. And you can see here when you look at these images, and this is about attuning your eye to see what it is that you might be buying, it just presents in so many different shapes. Now, as I said in the mineral video, the stuff that is in the clear quartz is considered to be the more expensive. It is not just valuable to those of us in the metaphysical world, but it is valuable to the collectors themselves of fine specimens. So when we look at that cluster down the bottom with the needles, that's a particularly pretty cluster. Then the one that's up the top with the blue tips and that kind of thing, that's the stuff that I think actually colorizes the Blue Dumortierite, the Blue AVenturine that I did on the previous video. What else can I say? Look, before I started researching, I would not have picked up that the one from Mozambique was actually Blue Dumortierite, because it just looks completely different. If you can hear my dog on his new squeaky toy in the background, I do apologise for that as well. Just to make mention here as well, I didn't find a lot of images from all these other places, and this is why you've really got to do your own research before you're buying, because mines can become depleted and they may run out. So, for example, if we've got a Brazilian mine and that one gets mined out, you're not going to find that particular crystal there anymore, but maybe they'll find another deposit somewhere nearby or whatever, and then they start producing again. So these are all the considerations. What I did notice, though, when we talk about are there fakes and not, is that when we look at this one that is the clear quartz with these beautiful blue flowers inside of it, somebody had purchased that and was saying, is this a fake? Because it doesn't look like the rest of the Blue Dumortierite. And somebody else actually came back and commented, because there was a whole debate about, oh, did you buy it from China? Well, therefore it's fake. Where somebody came back and said no, they actually argued it, and they said, yes, just because it's come out of China doesn't mean that it's fake. This person was aware of the fact that there was one retailer that they'd known about some time earlier that had a whole heap of these things, and he was aware that they had bought them from Brazil directly, imported them into China, and then polished and made them look a bit prettier, and then sold them off. And his perception was that the Chinese person, the retailer, had actually bought low grade of this. I mean, to me, it looks absolutely fabulous there. But it's the cutting and the polishing that was able to enhance the way it looked on the outside. So you could see these lovely blue flowers. Anyway, suffice to say, look, there is a bit of confusion about whether or not it can be faked. And I guess you'll just have to use your own discretion with that, as would I. The only thing that I would say probably a bit more than this, and I forgot to put images up for this, is that my Blue Dumortierite that I've got is actually tumbled stone. So if I was to look at the examples we've got here, I would say take a look at the image that is second from the left, and that would be very similar to the material that my tumbles have been polished with. So it's got this like inconsistent color with it, but at the same time mine is probably a paler blue than what we're looking at here. So all that being said and done, on the assumption that you've actually purchased yourself a piece of Blue Dumortierite now, the idea of the spiritual attributes is what can we hope for, or what do we believe might occur once we've actually made our purchase and attuned it to us. Don't forget there's an attunement video on this playlist as well, how to attune your crystals and prepare them for your use, personalizing them. So it's got a number of spiritual attributes. It's associated with the brow and the throat chakra and is considered to be a stone of activation, opening up a person to their psychic gifts. Now, of course, you've got control over whether or not it will do that, because if that's not something that you want to use the crystal for, if you're like, no, not at all, I'd rather use the emotional and physical attributes of the crystal, that's your choice. But, it's said to be able to support you to develop those gifts if it was something that you desired. Now, there is also, I mentioned before, the capacity to create this heightened awareness and even energy awareness. When we start feeling energy, it feels sometimes a bit like a tingling or pins and needles, or it can feel warm or cold or whatever. So we're talking about our sensitivity opening up or enhancing, if I can speak, the sensitivity, our responses to energy, to be able to aware of what is going on. Excuse me as I stumble over my tongue and be tongue-tied. Of course, okay, it is also linked to the access to the higher realms, the celestial and spiritual realms. That includes your angels, guides, and spirit, if that's what you're into. It's said to assist and support a person to be able to do astral travel and projection. And if you're into wanting to do more with your dream work, which that obviously you've got to start by remembering your dreams. So there's active dream recollection, and then lucid dreaming is something where a lot of people want to work on that. So it's said to enhance that as well. And it's said also to enhance your intuition. Now, bear in mind, if you're lucky enough to get one of those pieces that have got the clear quartz attached to it, like with that beautiful blue flowers, clear quartz is considered to be an amplifier of energy. Now, Dumortierite on its own is said to be extremely powerful. So once you introduce clear quartz into that scenario, you've got a double whammy of it. So you will probably want to do some grounding after you've used it. And it was not something that I really noticed. I was wearing mine yesterday, for the first time. Now, I must say, actually, I picked it up by accident. The piece that I've got is quite similar to some of my sodalite, and I was actually wanting to wear some sodalite. And it wasn't until later on in the day I was like, something doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to me. And so I had a look at it. It was actually the Blue Dumortierite that I was wearing. Now, what I can say is I definitely did feel a bit spacey and a bit ungrounded. But we'll talk about that a little bit more on one of the next slides. So when we talk about the physical benefits of Blue Dumortierite, it doesn't have this great big long list of attributes as we would see with some of the other crystals, but nevertheless, it is still nothing to be sneezed at. Now, before I talk about this, of course, I've got to do that reminder to you that you would not, if you've got any physical ailments, any mental health issues or whatever, you don't disengage from your practitioners and just rely on your crystals themselves. What you would do, of course, is incorporate your crystals into your treatment planning. What was I going to say? because your crystals will complement whatever it is that you're trying to achieve physically, emotionally, psychologically. Anyway, so let's take a look at some of the physical attributes for Blue Dumortierite. There is brain function, of course. I found that very interesting. So it's associated with neural repatterning. That's the neural pathways. Excuse me as I cough. Sorry, which is also associated with basically recovery from addiction and rebuilding thought processes, thought patterning. You know, if you suffer from negative mind speak, or what we call cognitive distortions and all the rest of it, then it's going to help to balance that out. I say going to, but of course, use your discretion. We can't make claims. Other benefits include the nervous system, and by that I don't mean sitting there shaking and quaking out of fear. I'm talking about the nervous system of the body, which is not just neural pathways, but it kind of is. It's the neuropathy. People with diabetes often have neuropathic injuries. Perhaps they lose balance on their feet because there becomes neural damage and that kind of thing. So it's said to support healing and maintenance of these kind of conditions, including carpal tunnel syndrome. So if you've got any of those types of problems, you might want to work with Blue Dumortierite. I'm just thinking, if you've got diabetes, you might want to use it and give it a try as a preventative, as opposed to, well, use your discretion. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Okay, so what else can I say? If a person's got issues with flexibility, such as arthritis, it's said to be beneficial for the musculoskeletal system, and said also to offer pain relief, especially if you've got them in the joints, the pain there. It's supposed to help relieve any headache, pain, and also to relieve any stomach disorders and upsets, as well as I mentioned the headaches and the migraines. Just look, a little interesting point here for you. As I said, I wore mine yesterday for the first time. So what I will agree with here is that my experience so far has been that, yes, I did feel a bit spacey and a bit out there, but I also did end up not so much with a stomach upset. Stomach discomfort I got, but that was probably associated with something else. So you'd like to think that Dumortierite was healing that, but I think maybe sometimes if there's an underlying condition, maybe it brings it to the surface for healing. I don't know, I'm speculating here, and this is actually where you could actually make your contributions and let me know what your experiences were, because other people, I'm sure, will appreciate your input. Now, I must admit, before I get into talking about this, my experience yesterday of working with Blue Dumortierite would not actually support the claims here, a lot of them anyway. But having said that, I need to work with it again, because what I was doing yesterday was, not only was I wearing the Blue Dumortierite, I actually was walking around with orange selenite in my hand. And orange selenite, or the peach selenite, maybe they clashed or whatever, but suffice to say, I had a little emotional outburst and I ended up having a sookie lala and a bit of a cry, but I also got over it fairly quickly as well. I think sometimes we've got to be careful what we're doing with our crystals and how we're using them. And as I said, I know that sodalite works well with the peach selenite and carnelian, but what I didn't realise was that I had actually put on the Blue Dumortierite. So maybe they were working in opposition with each other. But look, either way, on its own, it's supposed to support emotional self-mastery, this balancing, regulating, processing and rationalizing of emotions, understanding why we feel the way we do, managing to keep it in check so we don't have this great emotional reactiveness, which actually didn't work so well for me. I actually explained it to somebody later on as I threw a little bit of a tantrum, a little mini tantrum. And then I went and had a bit of a sook because I felt bad about it, as you do. Right, so it's supposed to be supportive for anxiety, melancholy, stress, nervousness, and tension if you've got that. It's also, if you're going through grief and loss, it's supposed to help reduce those symptoms. And if fear is something that you struggle with, then and panic type disorders, then it's supposed to help you to release those fears and to be able to manage them in ways where you retain your function. People that have got compulsive type behaviors, such as eating disorders, or if they've got poor impulse control, it's supposed to be supportive of getting a handle on those. It's supposed to also build willpower and courage. What a bonus. And particularly, this is where I think it comes into its own as well as the crystal of self mastery, if you like. It's also about the intellect. I'm going to have to pause this while my doggy stops squeaking. I stopped talking and he's now looking at me like, is there something wrong? Yeah, okay, so I'm going to push on with this. All right, so as a crystal of the intellect, it's supposed to enhance a person's ability to learn, to study, to process new information, and to retain it, and for memory recall. So it's actually recommended for students, and I would say for academics, okay, because it's recommended to take into an exam with you. But if you're doing study, then I would recommend or suggest that you might consider wearing it on your person when you go in. But don't forget to ground, okay, because you don't want to be all in your head. The other thing, too, whether you're an academic or not, we seem to get success once we've got greater order in our lives and when we've got a methodical approach to our tasks. And so organisation is helped out. This is good for students as well. And it's supposed to inspire an open-mindedness, patience, positivity, calmness, trust, and communication. Now, ultimately, when we develop all of these traits, we're going to observe and notice some demonstrable changes in our relationships that will be healthier, and so their relationship improvements. Now, as I said on one of the earlier slides, Blue Dumortierite is associated with the brow and the throat chakra. So we're talking communication here. I don't think that I have seen people refer to it as being associated with the crown chakra, but I'm going to say that it is, because it is associated with the intellect, the information processing, and of course, it's all interactive, shall we say, seeing, understanding, knowing. If we're talking knowledge, we're talking crown chakra as well. So for me, I'm going to say it's associated with the brow, the throat, and the crown. Now, when it comes to uses, how you use the crystal is actually going to depend on your intention for use, okay? How you attune your crystal anyway. Before I talk about this, though, I just want to make mention of these crystals in this bowl here as far as an image goes. This is actually really quite similar to the Dumortierite that I've got here. Really pretty stuff. So anyway, of course, it's going to make a great environmental or ornamental addition to your home. It will radiate out the energy and give off an ambience of peace. However, if you're looking to increase or maximize your connection to the higher realms, then you might want to wear it on your person, or if you work with energy and you've got a room set up, you might want to place it out there as a carving or something like that. If you're new to crystals in the metaphysical world, you might want to meditate with a piece in your hand, or you could lie down and place a piece over your third eye. That's another option. For those of you who are students and actively learning and studying, it doesn't have to be academic. You could actually be following pursuits and studying the metaphysical or the theosophical or whatever area of interest that you've got. I recall at one stage I was doing, not through any university degree or anything like that. It wasn't a formal study, but I was actually doing a lot of research on angels. I wanted to understand angels and the spiritual realm much better than I did previously. And let's just say that's an area that you never stop learning and growing in. But suffice to say, if you were looking to do that, sometimes the content that you're looking at seems very complex. Even if you're into biblical studies and that kind of thing, the language that is used, it can be quite difficult to translate that into modern understanding, shall we say. So you could place some Blue Dumortierite on your desk as an option. I'm actually thinking that it might be beneficial for me to put a little bit on my computer desk to help me when I'm doing my research for these videos, especially when it comes to the mineral stuff, because that really does my head in. Anyway, other things that you could do is meditating, as I say, after starting your intent. Um, my favorite way of working with crystals at the moment is actually to wear them in a macrame type pouch around my neck. And that way I can swap the tumbles out and just experience a different crystal at different times. But I must say, I have learned very recently that it's not necessarily a popular method for the younger generation who think, if you don't mind, that it makes us all look a little bit too hippie. I think they should just lighten up, myself, and not worry about it. But anyway, if you're worried about the macrame look, you could just get your pendant set in carved silver, in carved. You could get a pendant set perhaps in silver or gold for use, and alternatively you could use it for gridding. If it's dream stuff or dream work that you're wanting to do, you could put a little piece under your pillow and basically focus your intent before you go to sleep, including lucid dreaming. Now, of course, I did mention on one of the previous slides, it is absolutely not suitable for ingestion because of the aluminium content. So you wouldn't use it for elixirs. The only time you might do that is if you actually know the method of creating elixirs without immersing the crystal into the water that you're trying to charge. But you definitely would not soak your tumble into that crystal, into a bowl of water with the intention of drinking that water later, because that would be considered to be toxic, okay? So, as Dumortierite, or the Blue Dumortierite, is new to my toolbox of repertoire, I've actually been giving consideration as to how I would interpret it as a messenger, and I believe I've nutted it down. I think I've got it, all right? It is a reminder to people of the power of the mind, and that old saying about what we believe, we conceive, and we create. So, it is a reminder to really watch our self talk, whether or not we're restricting ourselves from accessing our potential. And I'm going to give you an example of this, which is, that whole idea of I am frightened. Well, you might be frightened. This is true. It could be right that you're scared of something, okay? But the idea is to establish, is this fear valid? Is it based on anything? And if you hold on to that fear, are you doing self-sabotage? Are you, by not achieving your goals, fulfilling a self-prophecy or whatever? Energetically, you can turn this belief around, and I find this one to be probably the best approach, okay? When we first start trying to change a limiting belief, this business of turning around, some people might say, look, if you're battling with fear, to turn around and speak to your reflection in the mirror and say, I am a courageous person, I am. Well, you could do that, but some people will struggle with that to start with, because it will feel as though they're trying to lie to themselves. What they are more comfortable with is actually looking at themselves in the mirror, saying, I am a work in progress, and each day I become more and more courageous. I am. That might feel more comfortable to them, because it owns the fact that there's a level of vulnerability in there, but also that we're always on this space of growth and development. So that's one way we could look at it. Another reminder of it could be that, these limiting thoughts are your harsh judgments of yourself, being that negative critic, holding unkind and uncharitable thoughts to yourself, being harsh on yourself. And this is keeping you trapped in unhealthy situations, thinking that you can't or don't deserve better than where you're currently at. So it is really a matter of really taking a look, I think, at what you believe, what you're telling yourself is possible and impossible, and opening up your mind to other alternatives. So, obviously, Blue Dumortierite, generally speaking, is a fairly hardy crystal. It can withstand a fair amount. This is going to vary, of course. If you've got the clear crystal with Dumortierite, that might not be as hardy as the other stuff that we've got, like my tumbles. You would still avoid banging it against other hard objects or dropping it from heights. I know that sounds as though everybody would know that, but the point is that we don't. I'm as guilty as the next person of popping a tumble in my bra or whatever, forgetting I've got it in there, having a shower, and then it drops out and breaks against the tiles. Now, I don't think Dumortierite would break the first or second time, but I think repeated drops and it will eventually break. But of course, I'm not sure about that. And I guess it depends on the way it's been carved as well, okay? Um, so that's the basic thing of, is it open to be scratching? Well, I think it would probably withstand being placed on the rough selenite, but even still, I would put it on polished selenite if I was going to do the charging and the metaphysical clearing and cleansing and that kind of thing. And incidentally, speaking of clearing and cleansing from an energetic or metaphysical perspective, my gut instinct is that actually Dumortierite does need to be cleansed, that it's not one of what we call the self-cleansers like selenite or kyanite. I think you will have to cleanse and charge it on a regular basis. But if you've got different information, once again, I'm always open to hearing that or hearing what your experiences have been. Now, the other thing too is, of course, most people want to know how to clean it. Look, generally speaking, most crystals can be put into the warm soapy water if they're a jewelry setting, or they can be rinsed off and washed off with a cloth. You would use a mild detergent if you must use it, and you wouldn't transfer the crystal, say, from tepid water to freezing cold water. It doesn't matter whether it's Dumortierite or another one. I can't say categorically with Dumortierite. It just would be a risk that I wouldn't be prepared to take, okay? Because not all will cope with these thermal changes, and they can actually shatter or break. Now, if you've got your crystal set in the silver or some kind of setting, yeah, you might want to actually use that soapy water and use a soft brush, and also always dry with a soft dry cloth, to get any residual water off. What else can I say? Just that my preferences are selenite. I love selenite because it's easy. I don't have to do a lot of thinking about it, and it's not time consuming. I do have videos up on how to clean your crystals, and I'm going to refer people back to that. But the other methods that I prefer is I prefer to use incense and aromatherapy, and I particularly enjoy the sandalwoods, the lavender, the myrrhs, the frankincenses. These are all very common fallback options for me. I've got rosemary growing in the garden, so rather than actually burn that off or anything like that, I might just bring some sprigs inside and lay them around where the crystals are. Um, just a point, a lot of people don't realize that if you're going to use incense and smudge, things like white sage is very popular as well. The idea is that if you're going to do it, that you do open up a window, because besides the fact that it can actually be quite overpowering as a smell for other people around you, when we open up the window, this cleansing process is a matter of removing any stagnant or negative energy pockets out of that particular space that you're cleansing, and it goes out the window and becomes dispersed and purified just within nature. Um, with my personal collection of crystals, and this will include Dumortierite going forward, I may from time to time, as I feel guided, expose them to rain or moonlight or even sun. But of course, being in Australia, I also don't know, because I haven't tested it yet, whether or not Dumortierite copes with the Australian sun, if it's very tolerant. I would imagine that prolonged exposure to our sunlight would make it fade. So just rule of thumb, I'm not going to bother putting mine on windowsills. I just don't see the point in doing that. Now, if you recall, I think I said I had started recording this video at 3 p.m. today. It's only going for 40 minutes, but because I've had to re-record some of the slides, it's actually taken me nearly an hour. It's 4:15 now. And I'd like to thank my little doggy for being part of that, because he found his squeaky toy. But look, either way, I'm going to say, look, love you, leave you, thank you. If you've made it this far, and well done, go you. I'm really interested to hear other people's experiences with Dumortierite, okay, because it is new to my collection. So please feel free to leave a comment. Anyway, for now, I'm going to say, have a wonderful week, blessed day. Catch you on the next video. Take care for now. Bye-bye.